How did Jesus have the energy to love his 12 the way that he did? I mean, he poured so much time and energy and resources into this group that he had selected. And there are times where his preaching and his miracles, they took a lot of energy out of him. He had to find times to go into spiritual retreat, times of quiet and solitude. How did he find that energy? Because investing in 12 requires energy. In the lives that we live, the way that we live life now, we find ourselves often depleted of energy, don't we? And we need to find a way to move to being spirit-fueled like Jesus was. Because without being spirit-fueled, when we're self-reliant or self-preserving, we start to feel like, man, I can recover energy and find it on my own. Or when we're feel like self-important or self-dependent, we start to act like the mission is dependent on me. And when I either hoard energy for myself, I end up bailing out, withdrawing from relationships, or I start overspending my energy, I'm going to burn out. Now, I've had both of those things happen. So if we're going to invest in our 12, prioritize our 12 like Jesus did with his 12, we need to find a way to move from that self-reliance to spirit reliance. That reliance of trusting and resting and abiding in God as our source for what we need. Spirit-filled, spirit-activated. Traditionally, the way that those in the past, the practices of generations have done it, the way it's talked about is spiritual disciplines. Practices that prep us for spiritual heart surgery. Remove the things that are preventing us from loving Jesus and loving others and finding new life, a resurrected life of things that lead to the kingdom. And to do that, it's God work in us as he's doing work with us. And we find ways to do practices that are in or out or together, corporate. Practices like meditation and prayer and fasting and study. In. Simplicity, solitude, silence, submission, service. That's the out. Confession, worship, guidance, celebrations, corporate practices. Practice that for generations people have participated in, not as a guarantee that the Spirit's going to do certain things or show up or that God's going to do what we want. But these are things that when we engage in 3 or 4 of these things, across these categories, we tend to find in our ability to increase, to activate that Spirit, to move us toward being Spirit-fueled. A silence and solitude, though, is the one that I want to talk just a little bit more about. Because I think it's the one practice that will help us push back right now on this bailout, burnout culture of self-reliance that we find ourselves in. This hyper-rushed hustle and bustle culture. That if we take time to reserve time and space that can separate us from the busyness and from the noise, it'll help us learn to hear a different voice and tell the difference between our own personal desires and those God-shaped dreams. In this silence and solitude, it looks different for all of us. It might be 20 minutes a day or an hour a week or doing a monthly retreat or half-day prayer walks. Maybe it's journaling and listening to music and Bible reading, doing it outside, doing it inside. But it rarely happens without being intentional, without a plan. And here's what I found in myself. The more I engage in loving my 12, the more desperate I am to be Spirit-fueled. Unless, if I'm not desperate for that dependency, if I find myself not desperate for that, then that's a sure sign that I'm being self-reliant, that I'm self-preserving, that I'm headed for bailout or burnout. Loving our 12 like Jesus loved his 12 takes being Spirit-fueled. So let's find ways, practices that help us stay Spirit-fueled.